Basic Brewing Radio is sponsored in part by the American Homebrewers Association. Summer is the perfect time to embark on a homebrewing adventure. Join the American Homebrewers Association for 1 year and receive a free brewing book of your choice to fuel your experience. Discover the joy of enjoying your own cold, crisp beer on a sunny day. Plus, get a free book to spark your beery inspiration. So join the American Homebrewers Association and start tapping into the joys of brewing. Visit homebrewersassociation.org/basic brewing for offer details. homebrewersassociation.org/basic brewing. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 17th, 2023. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Scott Housel, who's known for contributing beers for our annual disaster show, shares an experiment with beers that are definitely not disastrous. Beers fermented under high pressure and comparing against normal room pressure beers. Will Steve and I be able to pick out the different beers in a triangle test? And will we be able to determine which were pressurized and which were not? Well, stick around and see. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters have already seen the video episode that I'm going to post to the general public on Friday. It's the one with my super delicious honey peach IPA. That's the honey IPA that I added peach juice to in the keg. And I'm amazed that I still have some of that around. It was really good. Financial supporters this week will hear a bonus audio episode that Scott, Steve, and I recorded after we recorded the show that you're about to hear. Scott sent us 2 extra beers that we didn't have time to taste on the show, so we recorded the tasting as an audio bonus. There was a very nice fruited Solera sour and a ginger beer as well. And yes, there were Gilligan's Island references. Anytime you mention ginger on this show. I recorded an interview with Chris Colby of beerandgardeningjournal.com recently, where we formulated a recipe for a nice sessionable porter, so you'll hear that next week. I've already got the ingredients for that. Later this week, I'm going to get together with Matt Giovanisi of Brew Cabin to record an episode. I think I want to do a hot porch Kvike pseudo lager. And then next week, we'll have a recipe development special guest as Adam Ross from Twin Span Brewing joins me to spin the beer roulette wheel to see what literally random style we can come up with. I'm loving these recipe development shows, and I'm loving the honey peach IPA that I mentioned earlier that I brewed with the latest hybrid yeast from our friends and sponsors at Imperial. I-10 Mangostini is a naturally hybridized combination of 2 Kvike strains. And watching the fermentation performance, it's easy to believe. I've brewed 2 beers with it now, both fairly high in gravity. And not only was my airlock bubbling before bedtime, the next day it was chugging like a steam train. I pitched the second beer, my red IPA, at a little warmer than usual just to see what it would do. And boy, it took off. I-10 Mangostini is meant to bring out tropical fruit flavors and reduce diacetyl promptly while having excellent attenuation. I think that honey peach IPA is one of the best beers that I've brewed, really. You know we love Imperial yeast. With 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package, I like to say my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate-gravity 5-gallon batches. Ask your local homebrew store about I-10 Mangostini from Imperial. It's available through the end of this month. It's just a seasonal, so get some now while you can. Check out all the delicious and dependable strains at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Well, this was a fun experiment to do. Adam Ross from Twin Span has shared beers with us in the past that were fermented under high pressure. But Steve and I, we weren't able to compare the effects of that technique side by side with, quote-unquote normal beers. But thanks to Scott Housel, we got the chance to do just that. Scott Housel, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
This is the first we've heard your voice on the show before, but this is the first time that we've been actually able to talk to you in duplex or whatever they call it.
Yes.
You are known for, people might recognize your name if they hear the disaster show every year for the past, 4 or 5 years, something like that, maybe more. You've been sending us disaster show beers to slake our thirst while we share stories, humorous, hopefully, stories of woe from homebrewers around the world, and I appreciate that.
Oh, it's great. It was unsolicited the first time, and I think I'd been homebrewing for a year and a half, so I don't know what made me think I could just send you beer, but I went for it.
Well, and they've always been good. I'll bring Steve in so that he can comment on that. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
The beer, we haven't been lying when we say we like Scott's beers, right, Steve?
No, they're good. They're great. I was trying to remember how many years as well, and I don't, but I remember last year, and I remember last year's beers were really good.
Oh, yeah, that was the 4th year.
Oh, well, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, no pressure. No pressure. I'm ahead of myself. No pressure, but we enjoy the tradition and we appreciate it, and we appreciate your sharing this experiment today. You sent us 2 sets of beers, so Steve and I have now the luxury of sitting at our own respective houses and sampling beverages at our own computers at our own houses. So I greatly appreciate that. What is the experiment that we're going to be tasting today?
So I brewed about 7 gallons of a pale ale, and then when I put it into the kegs, that's where the difference happened. That's where I put pressure on one, and the other one had no pressure throughout the fermentation.
So you fermented in kegs. So you weren't, and so the vessels were the same in both. So you weren't like in a carboy in one and in a pressurized keg in the other, right?
Exactly.
That's a good. I don't know that I would have thought about that. I might have just fermented in a regular fermenter for one and in the pressurized keg for the other. But I'm assuming that you don't usually ferment in a keg.
No, this was actually the first time for that too. So my idea was that I do them at room temperature to come up with a simple method, and then basically to see, is there a difference between pressure and no pressure? So if I wanted to make a quick pale ale at room temp with Lutra or with a Kvike, that I would see if there's a difference and what would be better.
Yeah. Is just right off the bat, do you see any advantage or any reason to ferment in a keg rather than fermenting in a regular, carboy or a bucket or some other traditional fermenter?
Not so much, except for the pressure and the transfer ability. It's easy to just put pressure on it and then transfer it. And also, I can do the Spunding, and I can have a carbonated beer at the end if I decide to.
Wow.
Well,
and you don't.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, forgive me for being so uninformed about this process, but so there's no issues with true, getting caught up in the keg and trying to clog the lines or anything like that. I mean, in my mind, I see like 6 inches of crap at the bottom of the keg.
Well, I read about fermenting in kegs, and they recommended cutting about 1 to 2 inches off the bottom of the liquid tube that goes down. Uh-huh. So you're actually pulling from higher up, so you leave all the tube behind.
So you got a short dip tube.
Exactly.
Well, I wouldn't brag about it.
Just lobbing them up for you, Steve.
Thanks.
So when we're talking about pressure fermentation, 2 things. First of all, if we had a bingo card for talking about pressure fermentation, it would have 1 space, and that would be Spunding. Anytime, because it's one of our favorite words. and the other time would be when we're talking about brewing under pressure. Okay, that's the only time I'll play the sound effect, I swear.
time for a sexy party.
Time for 60 party.
Okay.
So anyway, this is serious science.
Yes.
So what have you sent us, Scott?
So I called it Ultra Lutra OK, based on the first Soundgarden studio album, which is Ultra Mega OK. And once I got that into my head, I couldn't get it out of my head, so that's what it became. It's about 5.4% and uses Lutra Kvike. Yeah, Sabro and Talus hops. I had never used those before, so I had them, so I used them.
Sabro and Talus.
I was going to say, I don't think I've never used these hops. I think I've had some beers utilizing them, but I've never brewed with either of those two hops. But I never heard of Talus.
Yeah, same here. I didn't. It seems like we did Sabro on one of the hop samplers, but maybe not. But I know that we haven't done Talus.
No, we haven't. Yeah.
Oh, this would be fun.
Yeah.
So
talk about your recipe formulation.
So I wanted to. So it was going to be a quick beer because of the Kvike. So then I went into. Let's see. I did 70% of Pilsner malt, and I did 21% of flaked wheat, 4.5% of acidulated, and 4.5% of Vienna malt, just for a little character.
Nice. I appreciate the percentages. That way, we don't have to worry about offending either side of the measurement unit spectrum.
I brought those too, but it was actually a 7-gallon batch, so I thought it wouldn't be as helpful to lift my weights.
And talk about the hopping strategy.
So I actually had a different hop, Evergreen, that I used to bitter at the very beginning. I did a 45-minute boil because I like to save a little time. And so that was a half ounce of Evergreen. It was 8% alpha acids. That was 45 minutes.
And Evergreen, by the way, Evergreen went number one in 1977. But anyway, go ahead.
I was 4 years old.
Ouch!
That's usually the way it goes for me. So then I did an ounce of Sabro at 10 minutes from the end of the boil, another ounce at 5 minutes from the end of the boil. I did a half ounce of Talus at 5 minutes also, but that was a cryo hop. So basically that's doubled. And then what I did was I dry hopped with an ounce of Sabro and a half ounce of Talus cryo right at yeast pitch because I knew it was going to ferment fast.
Oh, interesting.
So I wanted to see, kind of throw everything in at once, let it ferment, and be done.
I don't know that, Steve, have you dry hopped at yeast pitch?
No. Never have.
I don't think I have either.
But it makes sense to do that, when you've got such a fast fermentation and you want it to clear out really quick.
Mm-hmm.
That, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and then I used the pressure from the fermentation to purge the serving kegs that I moved them over into later. So I filled 2 kegs with sanitizer and used the pressure from the pressure fermentation to push the sanitizer out. And that tells you how much is coming out. I was able to purge 2 kegs with it, and still, I probably could have done more.
So what was the strategy of the pressurization? I assume did you put an airlock on the one that wasn't pressurized, and the Spunding valve on the other one?
Exactly. Yep. And I started at 7 psi, and then since the Kvike moved so fast, I was little less than 24 hours. I upped it to 15 psi, which is kind of the limit that people recommend for pressure fermentations.
And what was the thinking behind that stepped strategy?
Experimentation was the thinking. They say to start it lower, and then you can bump it up. So I kind of wanted to be working towards carbonating the keg as well with the higher carbonation rate, or with the higher psi.
And we've had a conversation. We've had a whole show with Adam Ross of Twin Span Brewing talking about pressure fermentation. at least in the professional side of things. But in your mind, what's the reasoning? Why would you want to go to the extra trouble and a little bit of extra expense to buy the Spunding valve? But why even do it?
Well, they say if you ferment warmer, it suppresses esters. So you can do a yeast that you wouldn't usually do at room temperature. Theoretically, you could do it at a higher temperature and not get all the esters that you get.
And then I'm assuming that Lutra, and this is Omega Lutra Kveik, I'm assuming that the Lutra is sort of a typical Kveik in that it tends to express like fruity esters.
I imagine it's the first time I used that as well.
Oh, okay.
I could do it again in the garage and try for it at 90 degrees, but I was kind of going more for like what happens at room temperature, something I can repeat ad infinitum.
Yeah, and you live in Florida, so you're
yeah.
Of course, you've got air conditioning, I'm assuming, or we wouldn't be able to talk to you probably.
No.
But what was your base temperature, your room temperature?
75 is the room temperature, but my readings inside the fermenters pretty quickly were at 78 Fahrenheit,
okay.
Which is about, what's that, 26 Celsius about?
Okay. I usually ask my watch at this point what to switch the temperatures. And I'm not in my little studio, so I can't see my cheat sheet that I got hanging on the wall. So, yeah, this was your first time with this yeast, but is this your first time using Kveik at all?
No, I've used it before. I've liked it every time.
And, I mean, I used, and this sounds like an awkward plug, but on the past two batches I've brewed, I've used I-10 Mangostini from Imperial, and that is a hybrid Kveik yeast strain. And I knew, or I had a feeling looking at the fermentation behavior of the thing the first time I pitched it. I didn't know it was a Kveik yeast necessarily, but the day after I pitched it, it was like going to town, just chugging like a steam train, even at my room temperature here. So I'm assuming that your fermentation was pretty aggressive.
Oh yeah. The bubbles were consistent and fast.
And should we talk about? I guess we should go ahead and because we're doing a taste test, we're going to do a sensory test, triangle test. But should we go ahead and talk about the the numbers, the stats of each fermentation?
Oh sure, they both started at the same, which was 1051. They both ended at 1011, which I verified with my hydrometer. So my tilt hydrometers were a little bit off of that, but I'm still learning how to calibrate and work with that. But it's really nice to see the progression. You can see the changes, and that's more important to me. And then the temperature changes were pretty interesting because the pressurized one actually stayed hotter a little bit longer by probably about 6 hours.
Huh.
And the bubbles were also continued at a fast rate for probably about 6 more hours than the non-pressure one. So it seemed like the non-pressure one finished first. But since it's Kveik, only by like 6 hours, so
it's like
it's almost unnoticeable.
Like watching a hummingbird.
Yeah. And then, so we ended at 1011, so that put us at about 5.4%. And I got about a little more than 3.25 gallons yield in both. So I started with 7 gallons. I lost about a half a gallon.
And are these bottle conditioned?
No. The one was mostly carbonated because of the Spunding valve.
Mm-hmm.
When I transferred it to the serving keg, and then that's when I put the gas on for the non-pressure one. And I left that, what was that? 8 days. 9 days.
And comparing just in procedure, not in sensory anything yet, but could you see anything that you find preferable in the one as opposed to the other technique?
Not really. I think it's nice to have the option to use the pressure. One thing, I started another beer in a keg, and the seal wasn't very good on the top, and I realized that if I put some pressure on it, it would push the seal closed on the lid. So that's something that I learned quickly, was that a little bit of pressure can help seal the keg.
Yeah, I've got one of those kegs. It's a little fidgety, a little fiddly rather, not fidgety. I don't know. Depends on your definition of fidgety. If it means fiddly, then it's right on.
Well, you got to fiddle with it.
There you go. That's what I was shooting for. Thank you, Scott, for the benefit of the doubt. Next week, you'll hear Chris Colby and me formulate a recipe for a deliciously sessionable porter. And I've already got the ingredients on hand, thanks to our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave of HighGravityBrew.com. I've gotten addicted to using the Build Your Own Beer page on HighGravityBrew.com. It's super simple, whether you're an extract brewer or you're an all-grain brewer, and whether you want to mill your grain yourself or get them to do it at high gravity, which is what I do. So many options. The Build Your Own Beer page has the contents of a fully stocked homebrew store right there in one place. You can create bundles to keep your different recipes separate in the cart. You can also get different shipping options. I ordered an ice pack with mine with an insulated envelope for my Imperial yeast pouch, and it was still cold when it got to my house. And while you're on HighGravityBrew.com, be sure to check out all the electric brewing systems and controllers to help take the pain out of propane. If you pick up a Warthog system or controller, use the code EBC75BB to save $75. Brewing season is right around the corner. Stock up now and show Desiree and Dave some love for continuing to be loyal supporters of this show at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Is it time for tasting?
Sure. Well, if it was for me, I've already poured mine.
Good.
You're already done. I've forgotten what you're.
I'm headed to the fridge. I got some Pabst in there. I already drank these 3.
Your wife's out of town.
Yeah, I dropped her off at the airport at 5:00 this morning.
It's bachelor party at Steve's house today.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so now you sent us 2 sets of beers, Scott. Mine say 1, 2, 3, and Steve's says ABC.
Yep.
And each one of us has an odd one out, but they're not the same odd one out.
Exactly.
Am I explaining that right?
Makes sense to me.
So in other words, my middle one, like my number 2, is not necessarily the same as Steve's B, a letter
exactly.
B. So we have maybe theoretically less of a chance to influence each other's sensory analysis, which
right.
is the first time we've done anything like this.
I'm very confused. Thank God you didn't use the Cyrillic alphabet. Jeez.
Well, just keep them in order, and I think we'll be okay. All right, I've got actual pint glasses here, since I don't have to share. I'm gonna pour these in actual pint glasses. 2 of them are from Superior Bathhouse Brewing in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and one is from Bell's in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It's a 2-hearted ale glass.
I had a girl in Kalamazoo.
K-A-L-A-M-A-Z-O-W-O. Oh, what a gal.
Oh, yes, she was a gal. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm using my HomebrewCon tasting glasses that we took home from HomebrewCon.
And I can't remember. Is it David? Is that our friend at Bell's? who showed us around Kalamazoo. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't remember.
I think it's David Curtis, isn't it? I think. I'll fix it later if it's not. But he showed us around Kalamazoo when we went up there to Grand Rapids for Homebrew Con. And the whole trip, we were, driving around in his car. The whole time I couldn't help myself. I kept singing "I Got a Gal in Kalamazoo," especially after we'd been to a couple of breweries. And I was like, oh boy, I bet you get sick of hearing that song. And he's like, I've never heard that song in my life.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I got a gal in Kalamazoo.
Scott, you've heard of that song, right?
I can't say that I have.
Oh,
sorry.
my God.
Good Lord. This country's just going to rotten ruin.
Well, I'm no jazz drummer, so.
That's right. Steve is a soon to be inducted Hall of Fame jazz drummer.
Congratulations. Good job.
Yeah, the Arkansas Drummers Hall of Fame, right, Steve?
Yes.
And it's not bragging on yourself if you just say that. So, yeah, Steve's
That's
the real
very
deal.
prestigious.
All right. Well, all three beers look the same to me.
Yes.
They are a beautiful pale golden color. One might say straw. They're very clear, very effervescent, nicely done on the appearance.
I'd call it harvest gold.
Or avocado.
Or avocado. It's they're beautiful beers. They're very pale ale-ish. They're just got that nice yellow color. They're not. I can't tell if they're hazy or I think it's just fog on my glass. Yeah, it's just condensation. The beers are beautiful.
Yeah, gorgeous. I took a photograph. I don't think that it does it justice, but that's tasty.
So the idea is so it's possible. I've either got 2 pressurized and 1 non-pressurized, or 2 non-pressurized and 1 pressurized. Is that correct?
Yes.
We just got to pick the odd one out.
That would be me.
So and these have been sitting out for probably about 45 minutes outside the fridge. I've tasted the first one. It's really good. It's got a super nice hop character.
Mm-hmm.
Nice level of bitterness. The malt backbone is there, but it's not. It doesn't call attention to itself.
Right.
I don't taste anything weird. As far as either fermentation defects or yeast character, seems very clean to me.
Yeah, it does. There's some. It's fruity, but it's not. These hops are interesting. They taste like beer. They don't taste like mango.
Right.
They don't taste like papaya, passion fruit. They taste like beer, and I like that.
I thought that was me. I thought that I just was getting that generic hoppy flavor.
Yeah. I don't get cantaloupe or bubblegum or blueberry or anything. What are you familiar with the descriptors of the hop variety, Scott? What are we supposed to be tasting? What's the marketing material say?
Sabro is supposed to give you a bit of coconut.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And Talus, I forget. I looked at it and it said it was a good to go with Sabro.
Maybe it's just me, but my number 2 is it's tasting a little more sort of darker in the hop character, like maybe a little more edging toward the dank or something.
Okay.
A little more spicy, maybe. But maybe that's just because it's like my second sips of beer. Steve, do you taste any difference between the beers?
I do, but not between A and B.
Right.
I do taste a little different. I don't know spoilers here, but I do get a little difference in C or 3.
PF.
Yeah. I get the spiciness too, and I'm assuming that's from the hops. But I don't know. I guess it could be from some of the yeast character as well. But what I don't get is I don't get anything in any of these beers that stands out over another component of the beer, meaning the beers seem to be in good balance with themselves. The malt is nicely balanced against the hops. They're not sweet beers, but they're, all beer has a little residual sweetness in it. I mean, it's malt. So I do get a little residual sweetness, but they're not sweet beers. And I do get a little spiciness, and I do get kind of a little fruitiness. And I'm assuming, again, that's going to be from a combination of the yeast and the hops.
Boy, my number 3 is sort of noticeably more the hop character, at least on my palate at that moment. The hop character is sort of more astringent. It's less enjoyable than I remember number 1 being. So I've got some water here, and I just rinsed and I'm gonna go backwards now. I'm gonna go from 3 to 1. But Scott, talk about were you able to? Well, maybe you shouldn't tell us, but what were your impressions of your taste? And you did some triangle tests of your own. There was a question in there. There was a question in there somewhere. I've had 3 sips of beer.
You're going to be okay. So my wife set up 2 triangle tests for me on different days. And the first time I was a little upset because I got it right. And I really was guessing. But what I thought was the difference was a little bit of the astringency that you were talking about. I felt there was a different character in the bitterness. But I was wrong. And then the second time, I got it wrong, but that was also the only difference that I felt like I could tell was a little quality in the bitterness.
Yeah, number 3 is it's pretty harsh to me.
See, mine's the opposite. If my C is the least harsh. It's like the bittering has been rolled off a little bit. Mine kind of like a high pass filter in a stereo system. You hit it and you cut it from 20,000 hertz down to 10,000 hertz or something. I mean, it just kind of rolled it off. But A and B, well, I'm kind of giving the game over here, but they seem to be exactly the same, and C seems to be different to me. And it seems like it's a little less astringent. It's a little less hoppy, from the astringency. So it doesn't have quite as much bite. It doesn't, it just doesn't have that kind of pucker factor.
See, now that I went backwards, and rinsed with water, to me, my 1 and 2 seem similar and more enjoyable than number 3. So less of that astringent bitterness, and it's not like 3 is bad. I mean, if you served it to me on its own, I'd be like, "Ooh, that's got a bite," But it's not like it's bad. It's just not as good as the other 2, and the other 2 are really good.
Yeah, I was going to say, to me, it's not a matter of. I find all 3 beers just fine to drink, and I wouldn't turn down any of them. I find this, again, for me, it's letter C, that choice. It just seems a little milder, and in that sense, perhaps a little more pleasant. But again, on a windy day, you'd never know the difference. So,
well, generally, I don't drink 3 pints of beer side by side.
I'm here to tell our listening audience that's not true.
Well, it's because we're usually doing these shows. Yes, I mean, I guess I do drink 3 beers side by side, but it's for work.
Well, that's just at the cookouts. Yeah. Are you kidding?
It's my job. Plus,
So-
if you're at the bar and you finally get
That's
the
right.
bartender's attention, you might as well order 3.
Exactly.
Well,
This is a really nice pale ale that, gosh, I just I don't have any experience with any of these. I think I've brewed with the Lutra one time, so I don't know much about it. I've never brewed with any of these hops, and the beer is really good. It's kind of like it really reminds me a lot of a German Pilsner on steroids.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
It's like Bitburger if it was like if Bitburger worked out. Like if Bitburger went to the gym like 3 or 4 times a week.
If Bitburger met Arnold,
That's right. We're here to pump you up.
we'll turn you from a Bitburger into a Biteburger. Okay. Yeah, I've convinced myself. I mean, 2 is still. Ooh, yeah. There's a lingering bitterness, like almost an astringency on 3, that is now that it's warmed up even more. I'm finding a little unpleasant, just compared to the other 2. The others, I could just they're very quaffable. Number 3 is a little more challenging on that front.
Yeah. Well, to go with what Steve said, I've always kind of tried to keep my IBUs lower because I found that I liked less bitter beers. So I love the bitterness, but I always want to aim on the lower side
Sure.
for what I'm brewing, and that goes along with that.
It's like salt.
I'm the same way.
It's like salt in food.
I'm the same way, Scott.
Yeah, once you
That
get too
seasoning,
much
it
salt,
didn't-
it's like ugh. Yeah, once you get too much bitterness, it's like ugh. So do we feel? I mean, we sound confident.
Well, I kind of am. I mean, I think I am. I don't really know. Sometimes I've gone frontwards and backwards with them. Tasting C, B, A, and then A, B, C, and I keep coming back to my C just being a little, just a little smoother.
Yeah, and I think I'm the opposite. Should we look? Should we open our envelopes or envelops, as my grandmother used to say?
That works for me.
All right,
Okay,
I've got my dad's pocket knife. It says a Scottish Rite Mason on it.
All right.
And
I'm going to
so
unthaw mine.
that's what my grandma used to say.
I've unthawed it. Ah!
Uh-oh.
I was right. I was right.
Oh!
Now, I didn't know which was under pressure and which wasn't under pressure, but I was correct in picking out the
Okay,
odd duck.
I am opening mine. No, I was wrong. Boom, 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 boom.
Wah, wah.
So mine, number 1 was no pressure, and number 2 and 3 were under pressure. I said I was only going to do it once. I lied.
Well, my A and B were no pressure, and my C is under pressure. And C is my favorite of the 3.
And you said that the under pressure beer was less bitter.
Yes.
Ah. So we
So we perceive the beers. We perceive the beers differently.
Yeah. I mean, I did say
Wow,
that
that's
I did
crazy.
say that number 2 was it was more bitter than was kind of in between the 2. Of course, now I'm justifying everything, trying to say I'm right, but I was obviously wrong. But I was assuming that number 3 was under pressure just because I was thinking that fermenting under pressure would, result in more bitterness being extracted out of the hop material. But that's just me making a guess.
Well,
but then your sensory perception would hold the opposite.
yes, that's correct. Yeah. So I perceive that the A and B, which were the no pressure beers, seem to be a little more bitter, a little more astringent, a little more fruity. So in some ways they have a little more character.
The no pressure beers.
The no pressure beers. The pressure beer I perceive to be 99. I mean, clearly they share 99% and a half of their DNA, but I perceive the under pressure beer to be a little less fruity, a little less bitter, a little smoother, a little rounder in terms of its flavor profile. The mouthfeel of the beers are exactly the same. I don't get any kind of grassiness or slickness, or there's nothing like that. But I do perceive the beer fermented under pressure to be actually just a little bit more pleasant for my palate.
That was when I thought I could tell a difference. I kept thinking of the word milder, like Steve said, because I felt like it was just a little milder overall.
The pressure beer.
Yeah. Yes,
it's like a diamond.
Well, you can gloat. I feel dissatisfied. I mean, I feel satisfied in that, I'm sipping on some good beers and amongst good company. But, I failed, which is a result. And Scott, you statistically also failed, right? Or you got it right once and not another?
Yeah, but I'm not confident in the first one. So, but I do like that Steve, I kind of would like to ferment under pressure in the future. And if there's a tiny difference that Steve found, that's enough that for this beer, I would do it again.
So fitting in with today's culture, you're taking the data that fits with what you perceive as your preference, and you're choosing that.
Exactly. Yeah, my main hope was if there was a taste difference, then I would go with that. And then other than that, if it's a process difference, then I kind of like pressure.
Huh. Well, I mean, I got it wrong, so you can't.
So you don't get the vote.
So I don't get it. Yeah. There's nothing that goes against. There's nothing in my results that says that you shouldn't, pressure ferment.
Well, now let me throw in. Let me be a devil's advocate here. The pressurized beer, even though I've been saying I prefer the under pressure beer, the no pressure beers. Here's what they have going for them compared to the other. Again, it's the same thing. They're a little bit more bitter. They're a little bit more over the top. They're a little bit fruitier. So they kind of strike me as some kind of a hybrid Pilsner IPA. If you like a lot of bitterness, if you like that really pronounced, really sharp hop bite, it's great. They're great, and they really are. They actually kind of remind me a little bit of Avery IPA, which I realize that most of our listeners, have never had an Avery IPA, but that's okay. A lot of them have, and Avery has that really pronounced hop bite. It's like, throw some more hops in it, dude. It's got some hops going. Where the under pressure beer seems like it softened that, it made it a little more genteel.
After my first tasting, I had a 6-point beer. I believe it's Bengal or Bengali. It's an IPA, and I wanted to see what the difference. And I tasted it, and I went, "This is almost exactly the same." So it didn't really help me. It's that, yeah, it's like a standard IPA pale ale.
Yeah,
to me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and we're kind of going down this rabbit hole where you have to split hairs to find differences.
Right.
If you just handed me either of these beers at a party or a cookout, I could not tell the difference. With food, I probably couldn't tell the difference.
Well, and if these had been straight out of the fridge, there's no way that I could have told. Well, obviously, I didn't tell the difference anyway. But if these were straight out of the fridge, I don't think that I would have been able to even think that I could tell the difference.
Now, see, mine were. I brought them out of the fridge maybe within 10 minutes for sure, and at about more like 5 minutes of the between I took them out of the fridge and opened them and started drinking them.
Huh.
So mine are cold. They're still cold, really quite cold.
So now you're just bragging.
Sure.
So
my original Twitter handle was Braggett.
Wow, was it?
Yeah.
There you go. So there's
what did we learn?
So maybe we should each talk about our takeaways. And I haven't talked a bit in a while. So my takeaway is I don't out of sampling this round and looking at the results, I don't see anything that leads me toward saying, boy, I need to be pressure fermenting. At least for this style of beer. So that's my takeaway is it's an interesting concept, and I'm still open-minded, but I'm lazy, and so so there's nothing compelling that leads me toward doing it. So Scott, what's your take?
My take is for this beer, I really barely found a difference. So it really doesn't matter. I could choose whichever one I wanted to next time. And I think I would be happy with it. And it just, it worked for both. So that's my takeaway. Successful beer.
Yeah. Steve.
Yeah. I'm kind of like Scott. I don't find enough difference in these beers to justify doing the under pressure brewing, but I would ask Scott this, since I've never done it, which is the easiest way to brew? Is there an advantage in terms of workload or time or care or or fussing with it after it's in the fermenter? Is there any advantage to doing it other than a very slight difference in the final product?
I would say the CO2. The CO2 that comes out of my my tank, I didn't use as much for the under pressure one because I didn't have to carbonate it at the end. And really, it was not.
Sure.
I already had the stuff, so I didn't really need to. There's really barely any difference. It's connecting to the keg, and both of the one had the spunding valve, one had no spunding. And they went into the same jar of sanitizer, and it really didn't. It sat in my laundry room. They both sat in the same place. So the advantage is the carbonation time and the actual CO2.
And there's a third advantage. You get to say spunding.
Exactly, and I get to think it every time I look at that valve.
It's always a good thing.
Well, this has been a blast. I'm always curious about new techniques that I haven't done before, and with brewing as well. And then, but I'm always, I always look forward to sampling delicious beers with people that I enjoy being around, and this is an example of that. So, Scott, thank you very much for sending this experiment and helping us out. And again, thank you. And again, no pressure, but that's a Hall of Fame drummer right there. But thank you again for your continued support through the Disaster Show. And Steve Wilkes, thanks for joining us from your home abode. And now you could drink all three. You can drink all three beers, guilt free.
I intend to. I got a pizza in the oven. So let's wrap this up.
Thanks again, Scott.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks again to Scott and Steve. Remember, if you're a financial supporter at patreon.com/basicbrewing, you'll get a bonus tasting or a bonus episode by the end of the week with Steve and me sampling some extra beers that Scott sent. And we may or may not have gotten more silly tasting those beers. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Till then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.